Hey guys, I'm Chris,
And I'm Mike.
and welcome back to this week's No Limits, the Thriller Podcast. What's new this week, Mike?
Not much here, but I know a lot for you. Congrats on the new house. Not a new kid, just so everyone knows, but a new house.
Yeah. So I guess it's been a while since I've been on the pod, but I bought a house and trying to fix it up, trying to get in before Christmas. So I know we're a little bit lacking. We haven't had a pod for 2 weeks, but we have a great pod for you today and next week. This had to be broken up into 2 parts at least, and we're going to commit in the new year. This is going to run us through the end of the year, but in the new year, come back in January. We're going to come back hard. I'm going to be focused, bringing you at least four pods a month. I'm going to commit to that, Mike. You're going to have to edit at least me 4 times in a month.
Woo, that's a lot. Well, that's 2 books, right? That's one Scott Harvath book and one Thriller
and
pod
something
book,
else.
So.
Yeah. So we're
exactly.
gonna do it. We're gonna do it. We're gonna get back on track.
We're going to do it. And speaking of getting on track, the last time you heard from us here on No Limits, we had Ryan Steck on. Or was that the Mitrap podcast? Did I post it here?
I think you posted on both. But if we didn't, you should go check it out on the Mitrap podcast for sure.
Yeah, check it out over there. So the Mitrap podcast has great things going on. And as I just mentioned, the Scott Harvath podcast, our season 2, we are chugging along with our 6th Brad Thor book. Is that right?
Yeah, I think we've done 7, but we're on because we went forward.
We did Rising Tiger.
Yeah.
Right. So we're going back to the original order, which means the First Commandment, and now
The Last Patriot. That's the next one we're going to do in January. Yep.
Yeah. So be sure to check out No Limits, the Thriller podcast, and the Mitrap podcast for even more of our content. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. It is Jack Carr season. But today we round out the 5th book we're going to cover, the 3rd one in the series. And Chris, this is a big one. Savage Son.
Yep. Very, very good book. You're gonna, when you listen to it, you're gonna find that it ranks pretty high on my list. It's a very good book. I was super excited about this one.
And I think overall it's most fans' favorite and Jack's favorite to write. Probably the one he enjoys talking about the most on interviews and when he does the media tour. I feel like this is the crux of the series.
Perfectly written book. I can't say anything. I can't say any more.
Something came to me when we were talking with Tyler, who we brought on for this one. What do you think about covering the most dangerous game? We do a quick 15, 20 minutes, our first short story on Thriller Pod.
Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah.
Because I reread it last night, getting ready for this today, and there's a lot to talk about, and you can see the inspiration. And I remember reading it in middle school, as you'll hear us talk about, but I'd like to dig into that for a little while. That'd be a fun exercise.
All right, I'll pick out my short story anthology from high school and I'll reread it because I think we had to read it for my senior short story course, along with the lottery, like you said on the pod.
Yep.
Then we'll do a little 10-minute, 15-minute.
Nice. Well, enjoy this talk of Savage Son with Tyler Boer, Jack Carr superfan, about Savage Son. All right, guys, today we welcome a good friend of the pod. Is this your 3rd time on the podcast to talk Jack Carr?
Yes, sir. Yep.
Welcome.
3rd time on. Thank you.
We haven't had many 3P guests, so it's like a little club there.
Yeah.
Chris Howdy.
You, Chris Howdy. No, Chris Howdy's been on 3 times?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. I think he was the first to 3-peat.
Kyle Mills 3 times.
3 times Kyle. Yep. Andrews and Wilson?
How many times has Jack been on? Once or twice?
Once.
Okay.
No, I thought we had him. No, we had him twice. We had him twice.
I was going to say, I think you guys had him twice.
Yeah, we had him once before the show and then once after the show.
Right, because we had him for In the Blood also.
Yeah.
That's right. The second one was harder to get. That's what I'm stuck in.
Yeah, he was like,
busy with the show.
Real strict time. The first time he's like, just let's talk. Like
we had him to talk Vince Flynn. Yeah, the first time was Vince Flynn, and the second time was the show. That's right. Well, today, what are we covering, Chris?
Today, we've teased it for a long time. We are talking Savage Son, and boy, I love this book. Tyler, when pre-production, Kyle said, Tyler said that this was his favorite book in the series, and I think I have to concur with him.
Ooh.
This is a very good book. And right from the gate, we get I love how, first of all, I love how Jack does the little, what is it called? Prologue? Like his, notes from the author.
Author's note, yeah.
And, talking about the most dangerous game and how that was his, he wanted to do that. And originally this was supposed to be the, introduction of James Reece in this story, but he thought that, all right, I can't do that. And I think that was a good choice, and I'm interested to get your guys' take on it. But boy, did I love Savage Son.
Yeah, I think for him to like that, and that's like his favorite short story as a kid, and it impacted him a lot. I know he wanted to do it first, but I mean, he claims that he couldn't just throw readers into this character. He had to like develop the character over a couple books prior, which I think was definitely a good move, because right now it's pretty much smack dab in the middle of his series, and I think it's still the best in the series. But Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, but you still have one more in the series to read, right?
I do, and I'm a little. I don't want to read it because Mike's already crapped on it so much.
No, it's good.
It's good. It's good. I would put it at the bottom of my list on the Jack Carr favorites, but it's still a good novel. It's a good thriller novel. I was a little tired of the pandemic literature when I first picked it up, so maybe I was a little weary from Lethal Agent and all these others.
I could see reading it like 2020, 2021 and being like, all right, I'm tired of this topic. But the content in and of itself is pretty good, and it's pretty different compared to the other four.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that threw me for a loop. It was really, really different coming off of Savage Son.
Yeah.
And then combine that with the pandemic and it threw me for a loop. So I think, what do you say, January, February, maybe we'll cover that one and we'll get The Devil's Hand out and we'll have finished the whole series. So I think a reread is going to be necessary for me.
I mean, we're completionists on this pod, so like I can't like let that hang out there.
No.
And one of the things, you guys brought this up, I think so. Terminalist was very different from both True Believer and Savage Son. I feel like True Believer and Savage Son were the most similar, like very different stories, but to me, I could tell he's like getting into his stride of his writing, and like those two together, I think are like 1-2 for me. Savage Son, I think we'll see what the scorecard says, but I think Savage Son maybe eking out, or probably eking out True Believer. But yeah, Terminalist is different. Would you guys agree with that?
Yeah, I think Terminalist is very shocking the first time you read it. Mm-hmm. And these other ones, you kind of know what to expect. Like Terminalist is probably my second favorite just because of how much it impacted me and got me into like thriller novels in general. But once you read Terminalist once, you kind of know what's in general what Jack Carr is capable of writing. And so you kind of know what's coming in a way of at least what level of violence and revenge and things like that. I think Terminalist is very impactful just because of the first read, pretty much.
Right. Yeah, I'll agree. I have to say, Terminalist, you get a sense of who this character is, but it changes him so much. And True Believer is that transformation. And I feel like Savage Son is the completion of that transformation, where we're seeing the character come out the other side. Where True Believer, it was a journey the whole way through. Reece had to, like Jack wrote, discover a new life and a new lease on life. And I feel like Savage Son, we're all in on that now. He's just ready to rip. And combine that with meeting the Hastings clan, which, geez, has been hinted at for forever. And we've only really met Uncle Hastings.
Yeah.
I mean, now we're getting Caroline, Jonathan, Rafe. I couldn't believe these were Rafe's first scenes and first like real words and dialogue, besides an appearance in the background of True Believer. Yet I feel like I know Rafe so well.
Yeah. Yeah, that whole family and that whole environment feels so flushed out and lived in and real that I think that helps sell the first half of the novel for sure.
Yep. Not to mention one of the absolute best performances by any thriller character ever in Caroline Hastings.
Yeah, for sure.
Just going fucking ape shit to defend her home. And I can't wait to get into that.
one of my buddies, John, just started reading this, and he's at this point in the series, and he had made a good point I wanted to bring up, that Jack can be poetic with his writing sometimes, and he had this little quote that says, Katie's eyes focused on a drop of rain as it hit the glass and trickled down the pane, weaving its way among its relatives, all born of the same gray clouds. I was like, that's probably like the most poetic writing he's done, at least to this point in the series. But any poetic writing he does is always on something like rain or something that's not story related.
Yeah, I like how he taps into, especially here, I guess a little bit of True Believer as well, in terms of like describing the African, landscape in the bush. But here we get a real sense of like, Montana and the mountains and the compound, and obviously I love how he does another name drop to Brad Thor. What if Katie gets off and she's reading what was the one? Backlash. She's reading Backlash.
Right.
He's tapping into his inner Brad Thor in terms of laying out the setting. But it felt lived in, and like I wanted to be there. I could have spent more time in Montana.
Yeah.
I don't want to skip like too far ahead, but I wanted to spend time in the 6 months where freaking James Reece is in Siberia. Like, it shocked me when they said he was there for 6 months. I was like, you're going to put that all in an epilogue and not even talk about it? Just this ghost that's coming in and out? Like, that was sick. That was fucking badass.
Speaking of poetry, though, I think that short passage, that little tiny passage about him going across Siberia as a specter, as a ghost, and how the native people and the indigenous groups respond to him, and he leaves gifts for them, but then he steals their snowmobile. Like, I think that might be Jack's finest writing in a poetic sense, in a true like literature sense. Not his best action thriller writing.
Yeah.
But that short passage, it hits so hard, and it could be like a standalone poem, like Robert Frost or something. I think that selection shows Jack's skill and just rounds out who he is as an author. That's more, and his most dangerous game connections round him out more than just an action thriller writer with badass shoot 'em up scenes. It's stuff like your quote, Tyler, and that one you mentioned, Chris, in Siberia, that just, I think, is why he stormed onto the scene. Part of it's James Reece and this revenge story, and we can connect to it. But it's elevated, hitting at another sense of literature that not every thriller writer gets to.
Yeah. One quick thing about Siberia, and then we'll get back in correct order. There's a good little surprise right there. I was listening to it again today, and he talks about how he gripped his ancient weapon. Well, like every other time that line is used, it's the Winkler tomahawk, and this time it was a traditional bow. And like you don't expect it. He doesn't say it's a bow. He just says ancient weapon, and the next line is that somebody died by getting an arrow to the head. And you're like, oh shit, he has a bow. He has we'll get into whose bow it is, but I like how it's like a little bit surprising. He doesn't quite say like he has a bow. You think it's the tomahawk at first, but
it's good writing. It's just good. It's good storytelling.
So,
speaking of poetry and good storytelling, Chris, how I like to share my thoughts on these books. Before we get into it, why don't I kick us off with a limerick? And, I tried to channel my inner Jack, poetic sense here. The trap, the stalk, and the kill. 'Tis blood that Reece and Rafe shall spill. Time for the hunt. Zharkov he'll confront. In the most dangerous game, what a thrill.
There you go, tis. That's the first time you used tis in a limerick there, Mike. Have both of you read The Most Dangerous Game?
Yes. I have actually a hard copy of it that's kind of hard to find.
Oh, nice.
That's cool.
I read it in middle school. Definitely remember reading it as a kid. I actually can picture it was assigned. I don't remember anything else about this teacher, but the 7th grade English teacher assigned it, and I remember reading it on my porch, and I loved it. We read that, and we read The Lottery in the same class, and I was like, it was probably the only time I've enjoyed an ELA class. And then I picked it up again last night because I wanted a refresher. And dude, it's just so good.
I was trying to remember. I thought it was 1923, but it was released in January of 1924 by Richard Connell, originally published under a different name. But I think it was originally released in a newspaper, just on like the top quarter of a newspaper page. And then from there, it really took off, and they actually filmed a black and white movie based on Richard Connell's original works. And what's cool about the black and white movie is they use the same set from the original black and white King Kong. So it's that island, and people are just being hunted. So they left the set up and filmed them at the same time.
And it's set in like Brazil or something. So it's kind of cool how Jack was inspired by that.
Yeah.
But it was a very tropical setting in an island off the Brazilian coast.
Yes.
And he's doing the Siberia stuff and Kamchatka Peninsula. And, you know, that's what I think inspiration is. You don't copy one to one, but you use something to inspire you to do it your own way. And
yeah,
I think that's done so perfectly.
Yeah, I like Medney Island in general. I don't know why, but I like the name.
Yeah.
I don't know why. But I just like the layout and how you learn about it through the last, the third act of the novel. It's just a cool setting.
Speaking of the act, so that made its way into the limerick. The trap is part 1, the stalk is part 2, and the kill is part 3. So what'd you think of the trap? Starting out, meeting, I guess, a whole cast of characters. Oliver Gray is brought back in, the Central African Republic stuff, and both Papa Zharkov and Zharkov Jr. What do you think about this cast of villains that's kind of being set up to lay the trap for Reece in the first third of this book?
I'll have to say this was probably like my, I don't know, not like I want to say least favorite part, but just I was a little confused because it's sort of throwing a lot at you. And, I liked when we were back with with Reece, but then who is this Russian guy? But then we get introduced to a couple of characters we get introduced to the Russian mafia. We get introduced to the Russian mafia's son, Alexander.
Yeah,
Alexander.
Right?
Yeah,
Alexander is the son, and Ivan Zharkov is the dad.
See, that's one of the downfalls of listening to these books is I do struggle with the names. But anyways,
the thing that helps though with listening to them is that Ray Porter does voices, so it helps me differentiate who's who a little bit.
Oh,
he's really slow too. He's very methodical.
I will have to say, Ray Porter fucking kills it.
Yeah.
He is really, I don't know, if I would listen to him read, I don't know, the newspaper to me. He's very good.
Well, I've listened and read the book 3 times, all separately over the years.
Okay. What's your take then on the audiobooks versus the imprint?
I mean, I have a really long commute, so I prefer the audiobooks, but it's because of Ray Porter. If Ray Porter probably wasn't reading them, then I don't know if I'd feel the same way.
Right.
But he just helps me paint a picture in my head a little bit better. And these books are very easily transferable into movie scenes and first and second and third acts of films. So being that that's something I really enjoy, it's kind of what I put it into eventually.
You could follow along that way. Yep.
Yeah. I even imagine camera angles and stuff of scenes when Ray's reading for some reason.
That's interesting. Very cinematic approach.
Oh, I guess just back to the beginning. Yeah, I was a little. It was jumping around a lot, but then once he settled in, then I was locked, and I didn't stop listening. It helped that I'm currently painting my house that I bought, and so I crushed this in literally one and a half days. I started last night again because I had started it. We were supposed to do this pod a while ago, and then I wanted to fully refresh myself with it again, and I crushed it. It was that's how I couldn't put it down.
I feel like the first maybe 5 chapters maybe was longer, and maybe he might have had to trim it up a little bit, but
it might get a little bogged when Oliver Gray is essentially trying to get hired by Ivan Zharkov, but he just wants to use his empire to basically hunt down Reece because he knows Reece will kill him from the events of True Believer.
Yeah.
And killing his father and working for, what was the other Russian guy? Andronov.
Yeah, Andronov recruited Gray from what I recall.
Right. That was on the beach
Yeah.
with the cameras.
Yes.
Yeah. And then, so Gray is being really rounded out as a weasel because he's doing this quid pro quo with Zharkov. So you're basically going to mess around with the Russian mob boss at the highest level for a personal revenge story because he doesn't want to look over his shoulder his whole life.
Yeah.
And he thinks he's smart enough to play that. And I don't get the sense that he is. And so you know he's going to fail, but then at the same time, you kind of just hate him personally. What do you think about Jack doing all this like sexual stuff with Svetlana, that maid who ultimately is one of Zharkov's spies? How do you feel that Oliver Gray was portrayed?
I feel like he really makes him a weasel and makes him like dislikable on purpose. There's always like somebody you hate, especially in films, just because of the way they look. They're casted very purposefully to look slimy and distrustful, and like that's how he's written. And then like all of the sexual stuff, I think that really rounds out that maybe he has just been a bad guy his whole life and like just stumbled into his role with the Central Intelligence Agency due to his background of being a Russian immigrant, basically.
Right.
But they definitely make him just an absolute slimeball and dislikable from like the get-go, which, I mean, from True Believer, you already dislike him, and then from the way he weasels his way into the mafia with Zharkov is just multiplies that. I know you said it gets bogged down right there a little bit, but I kind of like whenever he is like getting the suits from Zharkov and he basically convinces and talks Zharkov into taking him in. But it's revealed, I think, that Zharkov was in charge of running and instructing Oliver's recruiter, basically. So like it was like Zharkov was like the man behind the curtain in True Believer, almost.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So Gray to me reminds me of a Vince Lynn character in Peter Cameron. And this guy who thinks he's the professor, who thinks he's very smart, thinks he has one up on everybody, but in actuality, he couldn't make it as a field officer, so he got stuck in the desk. He has like daddy issues, mommy issues, impotence issues, and because of that, he's very insecure. So, obviously Jack plays up on that throughout the novel and really makes you dislike him, and the fact that that he obviously played a role in the killing of Reese's father makes you just like despise him even more. And at the very end, I guess I'm jumping ahead again. At first, I was like, "Holy shit, James is really gonna let him live?" Like, I was like, "No." I was almost like, "Oh, I don't like this book." Like, no. And then a 180, he ends up killing him, like, which is like, fuck yeah, like let's do it. But
he was being a weasel there too, because he was like, I might get out of this situation.
Yeah,
Reece might think I'm valuable to hunt down Nizar Katan, and Reece is like, nope, bye, click.
Yeah.
So I'll ask it later, but remind me to bring up Katan at the very end. But
yeah, there's a couple of in the blood connections, and we can't say too much, but I think something I was originally maybe thought was lacking in Savage Son on my first read definitely comes full circle like 2 books later. So I think Jack's playing the long game.
Yeah.
And even when we get to the epilogue, we'll talk about the long game being played. And while we're on Oliver Gray, I mean, the watch, even the Rolex Submariner has been this totem, hanging over everything. And well, one, Reece finally gets it back in the end. Spoiler alert. But Gray was wearing it as a token from hiring that Landry guy to hit his father. It's really coming full circle. And I think I think this is a benefit of his outlining. He's always talked about being a plotter instead of a pantser, where he is thinking 2-3 books ahead and knows where these characters in this universe is headed. And I think that pays off when all of these nuggets and seeds a book or 2 earlier pay off later. So I think Savage Son is a better book having read In the Blood, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually agree. I think that this felt like something was lacking a little bit, and then even through like Devil's Hand,
right?
You're like, man, I just like want that payoff, and you eventually get it.
Yeah. So I was going to ask you. We can just talk about it now. So I have read In the Blood, haven't read Devil's Hand, and now I've read Savage Son, so I can see how he doesn't talk about any of this stuff in Devil's Hand at all.
It's on the back burner a little bit. Would you agree?
Okay.
Yeah, so something that you'll notice in each book is the publisher wants each book to be able to be picked up and read without reading the other ones. So you'll see a brief review towards the very beginning of each book where, they'll say, well, James is in this book, James got a surgery to remove a brain tumor that he got from an experimental drug that made him take revenge from coast to coast. So there's always these little like they aren't updates, they're like small summaries of past events. And so you'll see stuff like that. But and like I believe, they mention Siberia later on as well. But yeah, you'll see like little summaries, but events from book to book aren't really detailed and carried over unless they're like reviewed.
And I feel like The Devil's Hand, though, is a very intentional, I'm going to zoom in on America and the American political system and even military in response to something like COVID-19. And even I'm going to purposefully set this in a post 9/11 and bring up 9/11 very centrally in that book. And so it really just has a different feel and tone and even theme than this series. I almost wish it was like a spin-off story in a sense. And maybe I'm missing the connective tissue. It's there, but I didn't see it on my first read. But I feel like, can you imagine if Savage Son was 3, In the Blood was 4?
No, and I don't think you can do that. It's just like you can't, like True Believer, even though it's not my favorite, it's probably the most important in the series because you can't have the next 4 books without True Believer. But it does focus in on, like, in Devil's Hand focuses in on the U.S. quite a bit. And it kind of makes you forget some of these events a little bit, except for the thing in the epilogue of this.
Right. That's true. Right.
But Chris, this is not a spoiler, but maybe something to get you excited for the only book you haven't read in the series is that someone important knows that Reece is good at crossing names off of lists, and he has a list for him.
Okay.
And
all right.
Yeah, more lists.
Yeah.
Let's get back to the list. That works so well in book.
I'd have to say this is not the only time we've recently come up where a later book can then elevate a previous book. And so when we were talking about the latest Brad Thor novel we did, that was a case where it's supremely elevated a book that we were down on. Like if I had never read In the Blood, I wouldn't be down on this book. But now that I have read In the Blood, I'm even higher on this book because I know like how it's gonna cash out.
Right.
And I like when authors can do that, when they can, elevate their work in a sense by giving us those payoffs. And like you said, Mike, I think by being someone who thinks about a couple stories down the road and not just singular focus, because I feel like, with Kyle, just to bring it back to like Mitch Rapp, it's very much been insular right now. Almost, and you could see like these don't really know where I'm going type scenarios, or like I just want to stay within this one thing. But I kind of like when they're a little bit more connected, a little more tissue between each novel. Even though I know they're supposed to be standalones and like people should be able to pick up the series at any point, I think it would be hard to like pick up a True Believer though. Like or even to pick up this one. I mean, you could read it, but you don't get the weight of not having read Terminal List.
If we just look at
you would do yourself a disservice.
Yeah, I agree.
100%.
If you just look at Brad, Vince, and Jack, I think this one is the most serial in the sense of it is a story. It is one man's life and journey and transformation over various periods of his life. Where sure you can say that for Mitch, but they're also just kind of badass action adventures. Sure, you could say that for Scott Harvath, but he's just going on all these cool journeys, doing awesome shit around the world.
Yeah.
Where James Reece, he is a character in the fullest sense. He's a human. He is, I would say, more human than almost any other superhero in these books or Ubermensch.
Yeah.
He's a human. He's a real man. And part of that I want to move into here is his relationships with the people around him. And that, I think, is a hallmark of Jack Carr and his life personally in the teams and as a family man. It's all about the people around you and the relationships you build. And this first third of the book is where we get the Hastings clan.
Yes.
Rafe, let me just first read a description of this man, because Rafe Hastings is a legend. And the way he's dropped right here, the first time he's really on scene in a dialogue on page. Now listen to this physical description. We'll see who we picture in our mind here. A little fan casting maybe. Quote, Rafe was a traditionalist who preferred the feel and soul of an earlier time. If Reece was Kydex, nylon, and Kevlar, Rafe was leather, brass, and walnut. The man's athletic physiques were obvious to the most casual observer, with broad, thick chest and powerful arms, built by decades of intense physical training. Though their wardrobes were nearly identical and their build similar, no one would mistake them for brothers. Reece's hair was dark with flecks of gray in his stubble. Rafe was 2 inches taller than his friend's 6 feet, and his build was leaner, with broad shoulders and a narrower waist. His longish hair was a sun-streaked blonde that hung from the back of his cap and nearly touched his collar. His eyes were an almost iridescent green that stood in contrast to his tanned face. A discolored scar swept the length of his cheek. What do you think about our introduction to Rafe here, Ty?
I really like the comparison, how they compare, Reece his Kydex and Rafe his leather holster, and it really gets flushed out more and more throughout the book with, Rafe likes a 1911 and Reece likes a Glock or a Sig, and then it goes into archery as well. Rafe, has a traditional bow, which I do as well. I have about 7 traditional archery bows. So whenever it comes to that topic in this book specifically, I love the descriptions. They're not too detailed to where it bogs down people who aren't into it, but the guys that are into it, that Jack is well aware of what he's writing about. And so,
does he get it right?
Yeah, 100%. And
Perfect.
He sets up so
How would
much
you know,
stuff.
Dude, I shot a bow once in Boy Scouts. Come on, man. I got the shotgun merit badge also. So
I was going to say, did you get the bow badge?
I got the archery badge, I got the rifle badge, I got the shotgun badge, and then I haven't shot a gun since.
Well, we're opposite. I didn't go to Boy Scouts, but I shoot often. So, but there's so many good setups. There's this archery setup where Reece surprises Rafe with the traditional bow, and later on he needs that skill to be proficient to make it through Siberia. And then there's also the setup at dinner here towards the beginning of the book with Katie, and they're talking about Reece's ridiculous adventures in Alaska
Yes.
that he was gone for. I can't remember for how many days, but basically dragging a canoe or kayak and going over glaciers and things like that. Like those story setups that we don't know about James because we haven't been around this family. And Katie, typically in films, your main character is like someone who's new to an experience, and then experienced people explain things, and that also gets that explanation for the audience. Katie is that person for those scenes where she's the new person, doesn't know the information. The Hastings inform her of that stuff, and that also informs the reader of the capabilities of Reece, basically. But you were talking about doing some fan casting. Is there anybody specifically that you're thinking of?
Well, Chris, you're our movie guy. I feel like you know all the movies and actors, but I'm getting like a conglomeration of a few. Like either of Thor, what's his name? He and his brother.
Chris Hemsworth?
The Hemsworths. I feel like either one of them, you take different pieces of them. And then the scar through his cheek. I never actually realized that before because I don't think it comes up too much. So now I'm thinking like a Mitch Rapp style look, which for me is always like a Gerard Butler. If you were taller, maybe like a young Mel Gibson. I'm thinking just because this kind of, not a mullet exactly, but this like shoulder length hair coming out the back of his cap. He's kind of like an amalgamation of a few.
I'm thinking of like John Bernthal for some reason. Like that was like the image that came into the Punisher. He was in
he was in Walking Dead as well.
Walking Dead.
As Shane.
Yep.
He's been in a lot of things recently. He was in that the new like spinoff of The Wire show. We Own the City. I don't know, it's hard to like fan cast because to me, I was trying to think of like someone who has played like someone from South Africa, or from in someone from Southern Africa who's white, like part like that sort of nationality.
Funny you should say that. I got the perfect person here.
All right.
Who is it?
Shartle. His name is Sharto Copley. He was in like District 9. He's from South Africa, and he's in a new movie called The Beast as well. He was in the A-Team, Elysium. District 9 is like probably his biggest lead role movie, but he's like a skinnier 6 foot South African actor.
There he is. There's Rafe.
So
that's a good one.
I like him mainly because he's from South Africa.
That works.
So
I just looked up the Lethal Weapon Mel Gibson, and yeah, like that age with kind of that hair, but maybe smoothed a little bit more. Between those two, those are that exact two profiles.
yeah.
I mean, Gibson would have to be taller also, but
If you want to see what Charteau looks like, you could type in District 9. He should be the first actor on the cast list.
What about Jonathan Hastings, the father?
I like in cases like this where it's an IP like this that you would like to bring a little bit of respect to. You don't want to cast something like a Liam Neeson because they
Right.
bring so much of something else that you might not want for the IP.
Right.
Where I think Liam Neeson might visually look the part and probably act as well, and he could probably pull off the accent and everything. I don't know. He's the first person that came to mind. So
That's funny because I was thinking like the same thing. I was also thinking like Woody Harrelson. I don't know if Woody Harrelson could do. I mean, he's obviously done serious, but I don't know if he could do that kind of accent.
Yeah.
But,
Jeff Bridges.
Yeah.
Jeff Bridges.
He could.
I can go for a Jeff Bridges.
Or a Josh Brolin.
Ooh, they got to have the gravitas. They really have to have that aura.
Josh Brolin has an old young look that probably wouldn't fit. And you need somebody that looks like they've been drugged through gravel.
Yeah.
You said Jeff Bridges, right, Mike?
I'm going Jeff Bridges.
Yeah. Jeff Bridges is probably pretty good. So
Anthony Hopkins.
Yeah, that's possible.
Yeah,
I could see that. Definitely with how rough he looks and how he could act. But I had a question for you guys. So with the information we know from the TV show, and now seeing this relationship with Katie and James really grow in this book, and how much stuff they do together, can you see the actors from the show being in this way?
I 100% can see the actors, but I'm not too sure I could see where the characters were written into in that last episode or the last few episodes even. I don't know if I can get there with those storylines. The actors, yes. The visuals, yes. But something about the way the two of them were in Senator Hartley's office in that house on that final attack scene, something about their relationship is far too broken or disturbed, which in the book, it was disturbed. And there's this lingering question of, did Reece play with Katie's life? And she has to know the answer to that. And one of my favorite things about this book is when that plays out.
We get the answer. Yeah.
Yes. And when that plays out, I'm on the edge of my seat for that kind of stuff. Often more so sometimes than the action. So I think visually, the Katie of the books, and in this book, I can absolutely see Constance Wu playing. I can't see it getting there without some major heavy lifting.
Chris, what do you think? And the biggest problem is if they do this in order and do True Believer next, she's not even really in that much at all.
She's not around.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think he's, from what I recall, he goes to see her, he sees her, doesn't contact.
Yeah, he goes to like the when she's a
news anchor,
her office, right?
Yeah,
and,
he watches her. He calls and hangs up.
Yeah,
I honestly don't think that they're gonna go like they're gonna go their own way. Like I could see them just fully writing a new story. You know, they sort of set the groundwork. They did a pretty true adaptation, or as close to what you could get for TV for Terminalist. They might call it True Believer the second story, but I could see them going completely off book, because that book is kind of like a little unfilmable, because a lot of it is this emotion. Are you really going to spend 4 episodes in South Africa or in Mozambique or Zimbabwe? Where they're in Mozambique, right?
Yeah, they're in Mozambique. I'd do like 2 to 3 there, and then have them get picked up by recruitment for CIA, and then like 2 to 3 with that, and then the last couple episodes be like the Ukrainian. Well, I've already seen that they're not going to do Ukraine, but the Ukrainian scenes from the novel be the last couple episodes, where he, basically it'd just be like a finding new purpose for life, and then a recruitment section.
I wouldn't mind leaving out even the second half of True Believer. I really wouldn't mind a season 2 that does getting a new purpose in life in Africa. I really want to see the sailboat, the Africa kind of transformation, the poaching, maybe an episode or 2. But I would want the main storyline to be the Savage Son storyline. Like, I think what could bring him out of that state of mind is the Hastings family needing him. And, you know, maybe it's Rafe who's taken or something, just some bigger jolt that gets him out in the game again. That's more than just there's a war in Ukraine and an assassination attempt on the president. That's been done before. I think you got to jump to the personal, the Hastings, the family dynamics, the Montana stuff. Like, get there sooner rather than later in the visual sense.
They need to flesh out their Freddie strain. And if that's going to be J.D. Pardo's character, J.D. Pardo's going to end up biting the dust, which sucks. But that you need to give Reece new purpose for like future seasons, just like True Believer gives Reece purpose for book 5.
Yep. I kind of wouldn't mind a mashup of True Believer and Savage Son in a season. I think that's the way to go.
I was just going to say that because, like you said, they can't leave Katie, you know, this actor. They obviously cast Constance Wu. They're not going to have her on ice for an entire season.
Right.
Yeah.
So I could totally see them bringing the Savage Son storyline with her into this.
Don't you want to see the Montana stuff? Like, don't you want to see Katie and Reece in the cabin in Montana and the kiss? And he goes, "Welcome to Montana," right after. Like, let's get there.
Yeah. So I think like it's good. If I had to guess, it'd be some sort of amalgamation between these two stories.
Yeah. So while we're talking about Katie, not to read another long quote, but again, this is some of my favorite writing from Jack. And it's crazy because people remember him as the gearhead, the action guy. Oh, he's a real SEAL, so he can get you in the thoughts and emotions and mindset of what the guys are going through downrange. But almost one of my favorite things in his stories is the relationships. And so listen to Katie. For anyone who isn't bought into the Katie storyline, who just maybe saw the TV show or is reading the books and isn't sure what they think about her, she literally doesn't know if Reece played with her life when he took out Ben, and which meant the dead switch would go and blow her head off. So before Katie knows if she can really trust and see Reece again and develop something, she thinks, hey, quote, "Who was James Reece?" she wondered. Was he a domestic terrorist, as the government had proclaimed, when they were desperately trying to find and kill him? A vigilante, hell-bent on avenging his murdered wife, daughter, and unborn son? Was he a disgruntled veteran who brought the wars home to the home front after the ambush of his SEAL team in the mountains of Afghanistan? Was he her savior? Would he have blown her head off to avenge his family? Was nothing sacred in that quest, including her? I love what Katie is grappling with here. Absolutely love how she needs an answer to this question.
Yeah, and I like what she ends up doing to get it. She breaks a couple of rules to make sure that she can get what she feels she needs out of the situation. And the only way I see this happening in the show is if what she needs to know is if Reece knew she would be safe from the car explosion from Steve Horn. That's the only thing that he did that put her in danger. That's the only thing that would be comparable to the debt cord question, really, in the novel.
Did you guys see that today they teased that something's coming about a season 2?
They've been teasing a lot. So who teased and on what platform? Because I'm waiting for the official stuff. Because I've heard a lot of teasing from Chris Pratt, from Jack Carr.
It was an Amazon executive.
Okay.
Vernon Sanders said there is some exciting announcement to come very soon.
Because we haven't heard from Amazon. We've heard from everyone else.
Yeah.
Well, that's an Amazon executive.
Oh, that's good.
The best teaser so far, and the best sign that there's stuff in the future happening, is the Danger Close podcast with Chris Pratt as the guest.
With Chris. Yep.
By far. So
they offered some guarantees. Without guarantees, they offered some pretty strong. We're not going to let the fans down. Something's coming.
I love on the Wikipedia page, it has Jack Carr's quote that said, in response to the critics, who's like, it's got a really good, fan rating, and so we didn't make it for the critics. Like, I love that he doesn't give a shit.
Exactly. Well, guys, that's the trap. The trap is set. We talked Hastings. We talked Katie coming to the ranch in Montana, what the Zharkovs are up to, what Oliver Gray's doing. And part 2 is the stalk. I think the centerpiece of the middle part of the book is the hit on Reece and Rafe and the shootout in the valley. How incredible was that action sequence? I think we needed an action sequence at this point in the book.
Yeah.
And it landed hard.
This is my favorite part of the book.
Agreed.
This is my favorite part of the book. Yes. Okay. The train up of the insurgents from Russia, and there's a few details that you could skip over with them, but I don't know. There's a couple that I kind of like, actually, like the one recruit that's looking at his AK. I think he has a AKM, and he sees somebody engraved something in the stock, and he's wondering about it. And like, there's actually like quite a little bit of information about just this like one guy wondering about his firearm that he was handed and who died with it last. There's like little things like that are kind of unnecessary, but I would miss if like I knew that they were there before.
Right.
I like them training up and how confident they think they are, and then when they get into the situation, they are pissed off that they are surrounded by these nobodies and these amateurs, because it doesn't take much for defense and reaction to happen from the Hastings clan and Reece.
Yeah, he keeps on referencing them as, like street thugs, but ultimately they all meet their demise, right? I think
all except one.
All except one.
Poor bastard.
Eventually,
Dimitri, he's gonna get it.
That's not the first time we've seen capsaicin up the penis, right, Mike?
Brad Thor has done it, and this book, we talked about him earlier, was dedicated to Brad Thor, who Brad had played an instrumental role in getting Jack on the scene and getting his first book out there, putting it in front of Emily Bessler. So,
what book was it that he puts capsaicin up someone's?
I think we just read it. The First Commandment, I'm pretty sure. He's
got the
pepper spray tube up the urethra.
Yes.
So
now
I don't know if that's an homage. Yeah, dude, Brad Thor did that.
So I haven't read that one, but my question is, does it go into detail? Something I actually liked about this situation was they show you, or they tell you about James prepping it and grinding it and putting it in the oven to dry it out, and then making like a solution and then like spraying it in the guy's eye.
Yeah.
And it, it's described as so painful, if his hands weren't bound, he would have ripped his eye from its socket.
Yeah. No, that stuff is really cool. When Brad did it, it was more the ongoing joke, or the running joke, I think, over a few books, was there's more uses for pepper spray than how we typically use it. And so one of those, I think it's just straight pepper spray up through, a catheter. So
that's awful.
No, it's not that. It's not that in depth. So I think Jack is paying homage to Brad, early Brad.
I like how it's some sort of ghost pepper that's like the hottest on the
homegrown. It's homegrown too.
Jonathan
on the
Hastings.
Scoville scale.
You got one of those ghost peppers for me?
Yeah. I like that whole interaction. So just real quick, back to like the ambush, which is my favorite part.
Absolutely.
The hillbilly in the Ford F-250 that stops to help and kind of spoils the bad guy's point of view. He's the person that spoils, but really it was, I believe Ivan Zharkov makes the call. No,
it was Alexander.
Alexander. Okay.
It's Alexander, because he hears that or suspects that they're going after Reece, yet he thinks it would be fun to have Reece as a little play toy out on Medney Island.
Then he realizes that Rafe is S. Rainsford.
Exactly. And he wants to save Reece and Rafe to hopefully entice them to come out to the island. So he calls Vic, and we got to talk Vic Rodriguez, who's just a G, but S. Rainsford, I love that too.
Yeah,
that is just
the callback.
Cool.
Yeah, the callback to Most Dangerous Game with S. Rainsford as Rafe's pen name is awesome. Super cool.
Yeah,
super cool.
Yeah, really good stuff. So what else happens in this valley? You got Reece driving back after he realized the ambush and escaped it,
pushing the team vehicle to its limits.
Oh, he's really pushing, and then, he's in and out of cell service, but he's able to get through to Caroline.
Yeah,
and basically tells them.
He says there's terrors on the ranch, which is short for terrorist, and he gets there, basically swaps Katie for Jonathan and Zulu, which Zulu does some pretty cool shit in this part, which I enjoyed. This book has 2 dogs that are badass.
There's a lot of cool dog stuff in this book.
Good dog stuff, When Reece fights the dog at the end, I guess we'll get there, but with the snowshoe, the dogs are really worked in super well.
Well, we've already actually had 2 dogs with Hannah.
Right. And I'm glad it's not just the dogs out in Siberia and the Russia stuff.
Yeah.
I'm really glad it's also Jonathan's dogs in Montana. So, you're not just saying the dogs are used for evil by the bad guys. They're also used as an integral part of life on the ranch.
Yeah. There's Zulu, and then I cannot recall the dog's name that ends up going on the drop with them in the third act. But Zulu's, I like just the way Zulu's described and how Jonathan has absolute obedience from that dog. And so basically, Rafe's in trouble. He's barefoot trying to get a buck with, I believe it's archery season, and the only firearm he has on him is a 1911. So he drops his pack and goes barefoot to sneak up on this buck that earlier in the novel him and Reece see, and that Rafe is definitely prepping to harvest for the year. And so he's going in on that, and the buck gets spooked, which spooks Rafe because nobody else is supposed to be on the property, and draws his 1911 and ends up taking fire and survives in like a pre-made foxhole that's naturally there basically until Jonathan, Zulu, and Reece get there. So that is their part of the ambush.
Meanwhile, though, Caroline Hastings is taking charge back at the house. So they've got the girls there, right? Because it's Katie and it's Liz who flew in Senator Thornton, and Jonathan. I guess is it Rafe's wife, pregnant wife? I forget her name, but that's Senator Thornton's daughter. So these 4 ladies are just going to go ham on the house, and I think it's Liz and Katie who go to the second story, and Katie's kind of freaking out, and Caroline tells her, anybody runs across this yard towards the door, you just shoot them. You pump lead into them, and you don't stop until they're down. And Katie can't do it. She can't find it in her to take that shot. Eventually, Liz covers her, I think, and gets the guy, and it's right on time. They pretty much, how many guys did they take out defending that house? At least 4, right?
Yeah, because what they used to go to the house is the F-250. So from what I recall, or maybe that is after Reece and them get back. Maybe there's another group.
Wasn't there like 10 guys in each?
Yeah. Actually, you're right, Chris. So there's
in each assault.
Yeah. So there's 10 ambushing Rafe, and then there's 10 that were ambushing Reece, and they went to I believe they go to the cabin.
Yeah.
So,
but dude, I love that scene.
I like this whole part because it's like, we're getting these cuts between the training. And then like Reece and Katie, or Reece on the ranch, or Reece, going into town. We get the archery scene, and I like the tension that it builds up. Because we're like, how is it? How is Reece gonna get out of this? And then ultimately, I think it's because Freddie calls because he gets the information from Alexander. And then we're like, well, why the hell does he want? Why the hell does he save Reece's life in the end, or want to keep him alive? That we find out later. But I really like the tension that Jack plays up here, really trying to get you to turn that page. All right, I finished the chapter, I want to keep reading. I feel like at this point that's where it really gets engaging. And then once we get to part 3 in terms of the kill, then it's like, all right, we're racing to the finish now.
Right. And the 2 things are going to happen concurrently after this hit at the ranch. Reece and Liz are going to take Dimitri, the prisoner, the one live guy, and get information out of him. And he spills the beans because he says, fuck Alexander Zharkov. He blew this op. He's the reason we all died and didn't kill you. And so I'm going to give you this information so you can go kill him. And that's my revenge. And because there's also this story of the lion and the cub, and he has to kill the father. And so everyone's putting together that Alexander has to turn on his dad, and this plan was being organized by his dad. So even the street thug, the muscle guy, puts together that Alexander is kind of the one who blew this whole op. And that's happening the same time that Rafe goes off to Romania, because they find out in the aftermath of all this that Hannah's missing, who is the sister working this agricultural program out in the countryside of Romania. And that's a good phone call when Caroline is freaking out. And she's like, are you Hannah? Hello? And it's just Reece. And it's like, what's wrong with Hannah? Well, that's where the story's going to turn to now. And we as the reader know from the opening scene,
right?
That we didn't even talk about that prologue, how she's being hunted by Alexander out in Medny Island. So when the family's like, shit, our sister is also missing out in Romania, I'm like, damn, this is going to really start picking up and like you said, race to the finish.
Yeah, this actually has the first of 2 prologues that I didn't care too much for until like midway through the book, and then I was like, that prologue was awesome.
Awesome.
The other one is In the Blood. I didn't really care for the person there where she dies on the plane.
With the plane,
yeah,
really.
I was like, I don't know. There's just something about it that like I just wanted to get started with Reece and stick with that, and then like by midway through the book, I was like, all right, that prologue was great.
Well, that one pays off when he goes to Israel, and you do find out his relationship.
Yeah, for sure.
Exactly. Yep.
I guess like the prologue plays into what I was saying earlier as well. Is like the disorientation. I was just confused. Like I didn't know who what are we doing here? And then we jumped, we forgot to talk about that earlier. But like, I think I agree with you guys that once we understand who that person was, I guess you get clues because she's someone from Montana. You know that the Hastings are from Montana. You're supposed to like piece it together, right?
Yeah. They talk about her being a track star, and that's why she can run so good on Medney Island and everything. And then they talk about her brother teaching her some resilience, and I think she has like interior dialogue about that she wants to cry, but her brother's like picking her up basically, which is Rafe.
Right.
So
I can't remember my first read through. So Chris, from you, did you pick up on that when you read the prologue? Did you think this is a Hastings? Do you think it was related to the Hastings, or did it take you to this point in the book before you're really like, oh crap, that opening scene?
No, because I had read In the Blood, so I kind of like, I immediately put it together. Like, as I'm reading it, or as I'm listening to it, I was like, who is this lady? And then I remembered they referenced that Rafe's sister got, like the whole point of the revenge story in Russia was because of, it all got sparked. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes I just want to relive reading these for the first time and
I know
and try to remember where I was at. But
yeah. We have to thank our patrons. Big shout out to our special operators, Jerry F., our special agents, Daryl, Kevin, George, Matt, Dawn, Dennis, Peggy, Catherine, Ray, Bridget, Jeff, and Mark. Recently, earlier this month, we had a great time chatting with a couple of them on a Zoom call, or was it Zoom? Or some sort of FaceTime call. I forget. I'm like in a phase right now.
You're in a fog, man. All that painting is getting to you. The paint fumes are getting to you.
I know.
And you got a cold on top of it.
Yeah.
And I'm making you talk for 2 hours in a microphone.
Send out a happy holidays to everybody. This pod will be coming out right after Christmas. So hope everyone, including our patrons, have a great holiday. Spend some time with your family as we, use this time to rest and recuperate. And we'll be back in January covering more Thriller podcasts. So look forward to us in the new year.
All right. And to give Chris a break, I will say, please subscribe, rate, and review using the Apple Podcast app. You can find us online at thrillerpod.com or using the Twitter and Instagram handle at Thriller Podcast. And as always, like Jonathan Hastings says, to the lads.
To the lads.